Did it go? So anyway, and I'm just very happy to be here tonight and to see Tracy and tonight we're going to kind of, this is an overview of Social Security. So I'll talk about both SSI and SSDI, but hopefully you'll be able to understand what the different programs do and how they work. And I have to say thank you to, I get to come because of grants from City of Bellevue, City of Bothell, City of Redmond, and City of Woodinville. And just a little bit about community homes. So community homes provides, promotes, and sustains exceptional community-based housing for adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. We currently have 10 homes. 8 of them are adult family homes. We serve about 50 individuals with developmental disabilities. We are in the process of opening another adult family home as we speak. For the first 2 ladies moved in at the beginning of the month, and hopefully the rest will be moving in soon. And we also last year opened for the first time a shared living home, which is different for us, for a couple of ladies that began to have higher needs. We're the landlord for them, and they live in a home with 3 ladies and 2 live-in care providers. We also provide housing education to families through our housing readiness workshops, so you're welcome to join us for any of those. I'm available to talk about, if you have questions about the system and how housing works, I'm available to do that through our navigation. And lastly, we have a housing networking group. So if you're interested in learning about, connecting with other families, if you're thinking about housing and you're just want to connect with them for information, support, networking, a little bit of advocacy, we meet the first Tuesday of the month via Zoom. So all that information is available on our website, and all our workshops are free, so you could register there. I will put at the end is my email address and our website that you can join. And if you want to be on our mailing list, you could also drop me an email at the end. I'll put my email in the box now. Kathy at community. There we go. Okay, on with the presentation. Let's see. And I have handouts. Oops, and I forgot to. I'll put when we sign off later, I will put the link to the handouts a little bit later in the chat box. I forgot to pull the link before I shared my screen. So, but you will get that. And this is what you'll see in the handouts. There's a bunch of stuff that I hope will be helpful for you. So a little bit about this workshop. The purpose of all our workshops is to educate and empower families to find or create housing for their family member. Tonight, our workshop is about understanding the connection of Social Security to housing and understand the role of Medicaid, understand the basics of SSI and the basics of SSDI and child disability benefits. Okay, so this is where we need to start. There are 3 programs in Social Security for individuals with disabilities. The first one is the one that is usually the entry place for most, but not all individuals, and that is Supplemental Security Income, SSI. There's also Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, and then there is Disabled Child Benefit, DCB. It used to be called DAC, and so sometimes you'll hear people call it DAC, and I sometimes forget and call it that. But there are 3 distinct programs. They have different rules and different purposes. So a little bit about each of them. What's the difference between them? So the first program, I'm going to click these here. So SSI is an income-based program. And, you know, basically it's a low income program for individuals who are have disabilities. And it's a federal assistance program, is what we say. So it's all these programs are federal programs. SSDI is based on an individual's work record. So if I have a job and I've worked for a number of years, and there's different ways they do that, whether I have a disability or not, if I have a work record and I, you know, either, you know, I may have already be a person with a disability and I work, but I also could be typical and become disabled. And that would be based on my work record. And then disabled child benefits are based on a parent's work record. Some other things here: SSI is tied to Medicaid. SSDI and DCB are tied to Medicare. Okay, that's the broad brushstroke overview of the three programs. We'll talk a little bit more about those. Here's an example of how these three programs play with or interact with each other over the course of a person's life. So, and most of us have you know, children with disabilities. So, you know, that's usually from birth. So, you know, SSI is available for low-income children that have disabilities before age 18, and that's based on the family's income. At age 18, it becomes based on the child's income. So that's where a lot of people who haven't been eligible before enter the system, is when they turn 18, they can apply for SSI. And so the person may go along for a while, and maybe the person with a disability, we hope, gets a job. And is DCB the same as CDB? Yes. They get a job and they work for a while, and you know, they collect enough what they call qualifying quarters, work quarters, and it doesn't take a lot if they start working young to collect those quarters. And because they already have been declared to have a disability, when they reach that number of quarters, then they will start drawing on SSDI. So they'll get a benefit SSDI payment based on their work record. So they may be pulling that SSDI along, and then as they, you know, go along some more and work some more, then their parent may retire. And at that point in time, they can apply for child disability benefits based on their parents' work record. So you can see how these various programs happen through the course of time. I put this arrow at the bottom that is really important. You know, it's really important through all of this, if you want to maintain services, that you maintain your Medicaid eligibility. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's just important to know that. So there's various points. So we're going to talk about these three different programs and then how they all relate together. So let's give a little bit of an overview. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with SSI. Here we go. So what is SSI? SSI is a cash benefit up to $794 a month in 2020. Again, it's a needs-based program, and it's considered the minimum amount that a person needs in order to pay for food and shelter on a monthly basis. You can use it for other things, but the idea is that it provides food and shelter to an individual. And it is we could say it's a key component for housing because it gives you income. And if you're going to be in housing, you have to be able to afford to pay for it. Not that you're going to get very far with $794, but it would make you eligible for some other housing programs. And then the other really important thing is it gives you access to Medicaid. So if you are eligible for SSI, you should automatically be eligible for Medicaid. And the reason that's important is that Medicaid is more than medical coverage. We think of it, as that's what pays for the doctors and so forth. But it's really a key support for benefits, including housing, if you need support to live in housing. And it also all our waiver services, if you receive a waiver, those are all Medicaid programs. And like respite, supported living, as in supported living housing, and employment supports, all those things are Medicaid supports. So having that connection to SSI and then makes you connected to Medicaid, which makes at least makes you eligible for these waiver services. Doesn't mean you're going to get them, but you should at least be eligible. Oh, and personal care makes you eligible for personal care, which is really important if you're looking for housing. Here is a little chart that I kind of like that shows kind of the differences between Medicare and Medicaid. Again, it talks about, Medicaid is a federal and state assistance program. Medicare is a federal insurance program. And they're paid for different ways. Medicaid is paid for out of the general by the states and the federal. Medicare is 100% federal program. The biggest thing that I think you need, they both pay for medical services, but they cover prescription drugs, outpatient hospital and inpatient hospital. But the thing over here is it's really important is Medicaid pays for long-term care, which is the waiver. It's for your respite. It's for all those services, DD services that we get. Almost every single one of those is what we call long-term care and is Medicaid, where Medicare does not pay for those. Okay. No, Section 8 is not a housing Medicaid service, but you probably, if you're SSI eligible, you would probably is Section 8 eligible as well. Becky, which amount is based upon federal level or local? The 794? Sorry, I didn't see that before. Oh, the 794 is a federal benefit, and it's set at the federal level. What you should know is some states actually supplement that amount. So if you go to some other states, you may get your 794 plus, sometimes it's, $100 a month. Each state is really different. Our state used to have it where you would get $25 in addition to the whatever the federal benefit rate was. But that went away about 15 years ago. So in our state, and it's long and complicated. If you want to know all about that, you can ask me later. Okay, here we go. So a couple of things you want to know. Let's see, I gotta make this so I can see my slides again. is that once your son or daughter turns 18, they become an emancipated adult. So again, they're going to look at their income for SSI. They become a household of one. And that's really important when you fill out the paperwork for SSI particularly. So at age 18, SSI, who is eligible? It's based on, first of all, their disability. And that means that they are unable to perform something called substantial gainful activity at the time of application. And that's actually a numeric number. So in 2021, that's $1,310 is SGA for this year. So you have to show that at time when you apply that you haven't made more than that amount of money before you have applied. So it's based on disability. It's based on the person's income. So if they have a job, you know, they have to be, you know, under that amount. And it's based on their assets and or resources, which need to be under $2,000. And that's something you're going to hear harped on over and over, is being careful about that $2,000 limit. And we'll talk a little bit about some other resource exclusions. So let's see. The first one is that they're not going to count your household goods and your personal items toward the resource limit. They're not going to count your home, which is a big deal. So if an individual, you know, may live in their own home, they could own their own home, and it would not count as a resource. They can own their own car as long as there's some limits on that. One car, and it can't be worth, you know, a huge amount. Money that's in what they call a PASS or PASS plan, which is set aside for, it's a plan to achieve self-support. It's a Social Security work incentive program to help encourage people to work. Or a PES plan, which is similar, a property essential to self-support, which is around somebody that wants to be self-employed. In other words, if they're going to have a small business, their business supplies and so forth would not count, and you could set that aside. You can also have a burial fund up to $1,500 set aside to be excluded from that. And let's see, let me check. Yes, Christy, the 1,310 substantial gainful activity is a monthly amount. Okay, now let's talk about there are some ways though to protect yourself and to be able to save some of the money and not be impacted on the $2,000 limit. One of those ways is through a special needs trust, which is a great way to set aside money. You can set it up with a lawyer, or you can set it set one up. Sometimes people will set up a trust. There's a word for it, but the word's not going to come to me, where you put it in your will that when you pass, this trust will be set up. So in other words, it's not funded, but your estate funds it. So that's one way, but you can also set one up now if you want to save, or if you know, maybe grandma and grandpa.
Testamentary.
There's the word. Thank you. I'm glad your brain is working better than mine tonight. And then in Washington, we also have a really nice option, which is the Washington State Endowment Trust, which you can join. It's $600 to enroll, and you can make payments over 2 years, I think at $25 a month till you're till you've made up that amount. And the really nice thing is, once you've paid that $600, the $600 stays in the account. So basically you set it up for free but they just want you to invest, and then you can put money in there. And that's a great way if your son or daughter is working. Sometimes it gets tricky keeping that account under $2,000, and you can, it's a great way to put money in there. There's also ABLE accounts. These are newer, and it's a really great option. You can put up, I think, up to $14,000 per year into one of these accounts. It can be the family can put in money, the person can put in money, but it's not counted toward that $2,000 limit. That's the most important thing to know about it. Let's see, and there's a handout. When I put the link to the handout later, there's a comparison between the Washington State Endowment and the ABLE's accounts that you can compare. The other way for resource protection, which is cool, we have in our state, there's a program called Healthcare for Workers with Disabilities. So if you are working and you're having problems keeping under $2,000, you can pay a premium to keep you Medicaid eligible. So you pay a monthly premium, and then you can make as much money as you want, and you don't have to have the resource limit, which is pretty amazing. And it allows people, particularly those that really have the capacity to work a lot, to be able to maintain those Medicaid services that they need to be successful, and as well as to save and to have higher income. So it's a pretty good deal. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about substantial gainful activity, and that should say activity, not employment. So again, it's $1,310. And the thing you need to know is this is kind of the break-even point for what we call SSDI. Again, if you make more than that before you've applied for Social Security, it's going to be difficult to prove disability. And if you're blind, I don't know why the blind had a really good lobbyist, because their limit is $2,110 as compared to $1,310. So, but keep that, you do need to keep that in your mind, that substantial gainful activity plays into several of these programs. So sorry there. Okay. Check the chat. So it's really interesting. John is asking, does the $2,000 limit on SSI apply to SSDI also? So technically, no. If you're on SSI, you do not have to follow the $2,000 limit. But if you want to maintain your Medicaid services, you do have to keep it under $2,000. So it's a little tricky. And sometimes SSD, people will convert over to SSDI, and the people in the office say, forget it, you don't have to report anymore. And, we're not going to be checking that. And guess what? Then they lose their Medicaid service. So it is important to pay attention to that. So what happens if a client is on HWD, then loses his or her job? Does the $2,000 limit come back into force? It depends on how you're going to get back into Medicaid. There is a time frame where you could put it into a special needs trust or an ABLE account. There's like a conversion time. We haven't had that happen too much yet, so this is a newer program, but they're looking at ways to kind of protect that. So I think there are things that you could do. Okay. So when should you apply for SSI? Usually what we suggest is you apply the month after turning 18. If you do it the month they do, unless their birthday is on the 1st, what will happen is, how before they're 18, they look at the parent's income. After 18, they look at the person's. If it's in the middle of the month, then they prorate it all out, and it messes everything up. they'll send it back to you and say you don't qualify based on income, and then you have to start all over. So you want to make sure you can make the appointment, but you could make the appointment for the first day after their birthday. You could even start the online application and then just make their appointment for the month after they turn 18. Again, it's easier to do if you don't to apply when they're 18 if they don't have a work history. Again, if because of that 1310. So how to apply? Oops, let's see. What's the question? I meant to ask whether there's special accounts pass. Yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. So should have the question better. I meant to ask whether these special accounts, ABLE or special needs trusts can be used to circumvent the $2,000 limit, even if you're on SSDI as opposed to SSI. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Remember, it's the piece around wanting to keep your Medicaid that's important. So yes, most definitely they can use an ABLE or a special needs trust or some of the PASS or PES account. Okay, so how to apply? You can start the application online now at, ssa.gov. And you can start, mostly it's your kind of your basic information about who you are. They don't usually ask a lot of more detailed question, but it gets the process started. And you can call and make a phone account, an appointment. What usually happens is you fill out that online part, and then they're going to mail you a bunch of information in the mail, more things for you to fill out. And it's good to have those started. And then they'll usually schedule a meeting with you. It used to be you would go and you could do it face-to-face, but because of COVID, they're not open much. So they're mostly doing those appointments online. It's important to understand that the questions are designed for people who have been employed, but are now unable to work due to a disability. So sometimes they'll sound, especially when they're turning 18, you'll think, well, how do I even answer those questions? Just think of as somebody, if you suddenly became disabled, and what would they be able to do or not do? Just fill out the forms to the best of your ability. Again, remember that this is a household of one. Yes, okay, let's do the next one. So what do you need to do? First of all, gather your documentation. You're going to need medical records, your school IEPs. Those transition IEPs are really important. So have a copy of the most current IEP. Any reports from therapists. Really important are any kind of evaluations that you have that describe their disability. Any information about resources that you have. You need, their bank accounts and savings accounts, anything like that. You're going to you'll need to have that information gathered. And if they're working, any kind of information and asset information. Those are the things. Gather as much information together as you can. In the handouts, I believe there's like a check sheet or a link to all the documentation that you need for your application. So next, what else do you need to do? It's really important at this point in time to set up a separate bank account for the individual. You cannot intermingle their funds in your bank account. If you are a guardian, it needs to be a guardianship account. And I must say, we've had a little problem. Sometimes banks don't know how to do that and get it kind of messed up. So you really have to talk to them about it. It usually will say the person's name, and then your name, and then it'll say on behalf for the estate of, and then the person's name, and then your name and contact information. If you are not the guardian, you need to determine if they need to have a representative payee. And oftentimes Social Security will require that. DDA or Social Security also kind of pushes for DDA clients to have guardianship. They prefer that, but you don't have to do that, but they may push for it. Let's see. I think this needs to go in the next box. So the other thing that you need to do is, it's really important, if they're living at home with you, to set up a room and board contract with them. And the fair market rate is between, I would say, $650 and $750 a month. And that seems weird that they're going to be writing you a check each month for, to live with you. But it's really important. You need to have a contract. Usually it takes a while to get your SSI. It's going to take several months. During that time, if they have no income, and if you want, usually there's time there, and when they finally catch up to you, there's a back payment. If you want to receive the full back payment, you will need to create some sort of a contract, not just a room and board contract, but a repayment schedule, because during that period of time, they have no income. So they couldn't possibly pay, but you could set up a repayment schedule that says, for the 3 months for the back payment, we paid it, but they're going to pay us back and charge like you could say they're going to pay us $50 a month for the next, how many ever months until that's paid off. Some people just choose not to have the full back payment that way. But it's really important to create that contract, because if you don't, what happens is they're going to reduce their SSI payment, that $794, they're going to reduce it by a third, because they're going to say that you are providing extra support. You're paying for extra support for them. Well, yeah. So it's important to do that. But what I've learned recently, some of the offices are challenging with that. They'll say that, you have to charge fair market value. And that's hard if you're living on the east side, right? But what I understand is, if you submit that contract when you apply, that doesn't, when it's actually processed, that contract doesn't carry forward. So once you get the back payment and they're receiving payments, you want to resubmit that contract if they've reduced that payment by a third, and send it in. Let's see. I know that's a little confusing. Some things that it needs to be, the contract, there's a sample contract in the handouts. It needs to be signed by both them and yourself. You need to investigate the tax implications. Most likely you're not making any profit on that, so it's unlikely you have any tax liability there. We talked about that already, about setting up a separate bank account. Yep, and they're okay. If you didn't charge room and board, again, the payment's reduced by a third. Oops. And considered subsidizing their living expenses. Okay, so what should I expect? Don't be surprised. People are frequently denied the first time that they apply for SSI. The waiting period is usually about 120 days approximately. I would guess that during COVID, it's longer than that. What I want you to know is if you get denied the first time, don't panic. The most important thing you need to do is determine who that denial letter is from. And let's see, I'm going to go to the next. You're going to receive, you'll get a letter of ineligibility. And then you need to look at who that letter's from. So is it from, on the top, does it say Social Security Administration, or does it say SSI? When you apply for SSI, they actually look at to see whether you are eligible for all SSI programs. So whether you're eligible for SSI or SSDI. So and this usually is the way it goes, you'll get the denial letter first, and people freak out. It's like, I got the letter denied. But if you look and it says it's from Social Security Administration, that just means that they weren't eligible for SSDI. And then it never fails. It'll be a few days later, and they'll get a letter that will say, oh yes, you're eligible for SSI. I hope that makes sense. But so, just pay attention when you get a letter denial to see who it's from. And if you are denied based on SSI, you're going to want to appeal. And the first thing you're going to want to figure out is, why were you denied? And again, the three things of eligibility, you want to check to make sure that there aren't simple mistakes there, or a simple fix, like, maybe they recorded the income incorrectly, or they counted assets that they shouldn't have. Maybe they have money in and they counted special needs trusts as an assets. So just know that that's, you want to check those two simple things first and find out what's going on. And then lastly, if it's disability, then you're going to want to watch that, and that's challenging, but so what will you need to do if it is the disability one? The most important thing that you can do is provide more documentation. So find out more, get another report. Sometimes people will go get their own reports, or sometimes some information didn't get to them and they made a determination without that. So the more documentation you can actually ask for letters from, personal therapists, physicians, friends and family that know the person, that can testify to, their disability and how it impacts them. So, the most important thing is the first time you apply, that you be as organized and provide as much as possible. Also, the really important thing is if you get a letter of denial, pay attention, and you're going to appeal, pay attention to the dates, because you have a limited time to make an appeal. So usually it's 60 days. So see when the letter arrived, and note how long it is until the appeal, and think about what you need to do in that process. You can appeal right away and then gather more documentation, but do pay attention to that. Okay, some other important things to know. Let's see if I can move this a little bit. It's easier to apply if you are already a DDA client. So if you're eligible for DDA, it will be much easier to do that. When you do the financial report for maybe the waiver or the disability part, a lot of that is done in the financial part is actually done by the same office that determines the financial eligibility for SSI. So if you've been declared financially eligible for the waiver, then most likely you will be found financially eligible for SSI. DDA clients are usually required a representative payee, and again, Social Security may ask for guardianship. This is really important. That $2,000 limit, they look at that account on the first of the month. So you want to make sure that they don't have $2,000 on the first of the month. And you have to remember the SSI payment, the $794, comes in on the first of the month. So the reality is you actually have to have $2,000 minus $794 in your account on the first of the month, because that payment comes in. So, you've got to figure out, check about a week before the first, see where you are, see if you need to move things into an ABLE or a special needs trust so that you don't get caught on the first with $2,000 in your, more than $2,000 in the account. Some other important things to know is you can work. It's a myth that you can't work and keep your SSI standing. You most definitely can work and continue to receive SSI. So just a little bit of information about reporting. You need to report income monthly, whether it is earned or unearned income. There's a couple of ways to do that. For SSI, you can do it by phone, or there's actually an SSI reporting app that you can put on your phone. And by the 6th of the month, you can report by phone or by app. You can also provide your pay stubs in the mail by the 10th of the month. If you're reporting income, a lot of people are dual eligible for SSI and SSDI. You do have to report income to SSDI. The way to do that now is through my Social Security account. You can apply for an account. Here's the little tricky part. It took me a while to figure this out for myself, is if you so a person, if they have a guardianship, they cannot have their own SS account. But as a guardian, I can use my SS account to report their wages. So there's a place that'll say I'm the guardian of, and I'm reporting wages for the person. So that's the trick, is to use your personal SS account to report wages for SSDI. And if they're both SSI and SSDI, you have to report in both places, which I don't know why your systems don't overlap, but they don't. You also technically should be reporting any other money that they receive if they're SSI eligible. Anything over $20, you're technically supposed to report. Okay, and I see we've got, and one more thing, and then I'll answer questions. You're also, as guardian, will be required to provide an annual report of expenditures. So you need to keep track of how that you're spending the money. Mostly with SSI, it's, room and board will take care of most of that, and whatever the little bit is left, it can be paid for medical, transportation, or other. I would say make sure your categories are the same as that you use for your guardianship reporting. But the good news is, recently, if you are the rep payee and your son or daughter lives at home with you, there's no longer is that yearly reporting form. Now, if they requested reporting, they could ask you for that, but you don't have to do it every year. So you still have to continue to keep records, which you would have for guardianship anyway, but they're not going to, Social Security is not asking for that on a yearly basis. If they move out of the home, then you will have to begin reporting yearly again. Okay, let's look at some of these questions. Yes, they've done away with the yearly one. I was a nice. Yeah, it's been a couple of years now that they did away with that. No, you do not count food stamps. That's a federal benefit. Yes, the SSI app doesn't work if you have more than one employer. It's also really weird because it actually has, I've never seen an app that had hours, but there are periods of time that you can't report on the app because it's after hours. So if you can't get in, you usually have to wait till the next day. What would be an example of unearned income? Any kind of money they receive. So if grandma gives them a, a birthday, this is one of the things you need to clue your relatives in. Christmas money and birthday money, if it's cash, technically now I'm not sure if they ever would go and ask, go looking for that, but you also wouldn't want to put it in their account. But technically you're supposed to report that. So I would suggest there are ways to do that. You could have gifts given as a gift card instead. That's the other thing is an ABLE account. You can set up an ABLE account to receive gifts. So if grandma wants to give money, they can do it through an ABLE account, which is kind of nice. You can even set it like an online thing where they can go online and make a contribution. But yeah, it's any money that you get that you didn't work for. Let's see, did I get all those? Yeah. Oh, interesting, Barbara, that your daughter's in an AFH and you haven't had to do the reporting. Interesting. Yeah, I think you don't have to report the first $20. Yeah. It would seem like it would be nice to be a lot simpler, doesn't it? I know it's frustrating. I think they think because they created ABLE accounts that that's kind of the way out, that that people can use ABLE accounts to keep their resources under. But yeah. Okay. How is the annual report of expenditures done once they are out of the home on the SS website? I wasn't aware of that requirement. Once they're out of the home, I think they would send you the report, I believe. It would be nearly the same as when they were at home. It's pretty simple. It's like, you report how much they paid in room and board, and if they're in an AFH, whatever that is, how much medical and transportation. There's only like 4 categories, and room, board, yeah, and then there's kind of like an open category, entertainment or something like that, or recreation, I think. So there's not many categories, and frankly it's $794, and if they're paying in an AFH, I think $723 is reported. So the rest is just going to be miscellaneous stuff. So yeah. Okay. So, here we talked about earned versus unearned income. There we talked about it. Unearned income, again, the first $20 is disregarded, and then it's reduced dollar for dollar. So if they receive, $50, then 30 of that would be reduced off of your the next month's SS check. Earned income. So there's some advantages to working, and that's one thing I like people to know. Earned income, first they get that $20 exclusion. Then there's actually another, because they have earned income, they also get to keep the first $65 of earned income. So that's $85. And then after that, the SSI check is reduced, where if unearned income, it's dollar for dollar. With earned income, it's 50 cents on the dollar. So I'm going to show you an example. Here we go. So Joey, let's see, has $500 a month in earned income. He gets to subtract that first $20 general exclusion. He also has earned income of six, so he gets to subtract the first 65. So 500 minus 85 is $415. And then divided by 2. Okay. So that means he has $207.50, what they call countable income. So then there's the, so the full SSI payment is $794. And then the countable income from down here is 207. So 794 minus 207.50. So that equals $586.50. So this is how much. And then they have $500 earnings. So their SSI payment that next month would be $586.50 instead of $794. And then they would have $500 in their earnings that they get to keep. So together, if you add those two things together, they would be making $1,086.50. I believe in the handouts, there is a calculation sheet that walks you through these steps about the various things that you can add and subtract to figure out what their SSI check would be when they're making money. So it's a little more complex when they have SSI and SSDI. So the thing is that when you have SSDI, and I know this is a little bit complex, that SSDI check is considered unearned income to SSI. So once they begin to draw on their own work record or through their parents, their SSI check is going to be reduced dollar for dollar based on those payments. So like I said, it gets a little more complex. So here is an example. So the same person, they have $500 a month. They get the $20 exclusion. They get the $65 earned income exclusion. So that's $415 divided by 2 is $207.50 countable. But they also have a $300 a month SSDI payment. So what happens is that full SSI payment is reduced first off the top, just straight across the $300 SSDI payment. So they have $494, but then they to subtract the countable income. So their SSI payment would be $275.50. They have $500 in earnings. They get $275.50 SSI payment, plus they get that $300 SSDI payment. So they're going to have a total monthly income of $1,075.50. So, it kind of rounds itself off. But it's a little more complex, but just know that that SSDI payment is considered unearned income, and it's directly, it's taken right off the top of your SSI payment. Okay, a couple little things you should know about if your loved one is still in school. There is, if they're under age 22, there's a student earned income exclusion. So if they're working, they're under age 22 and they're regularly attending school, they can earn up to $1,930 gross per month, or $7,770 for the year in this year. And they don't reduce the SSI payment. And this is only if they're on SSI. So it's an opportunity for them to make some money. I always say opportunity knocks. If they're in school between the age of 18 and 21, when they're still in school, and if they're making money, and frankly, if they're, they may be drawing an SSI payment, they're still living with you, nothing's changed from before, I say it's a really nice time to tuck money away in a trust or an able account to save for future things like housing or other future goals. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want, but I always think families should at least consider that. Let's see. Yeah, so if an adult child never earns income and does not get SSDI based on their own income, they could become eligible. Yes, we're going to talk about that in a minute for child disability benefits. Yes, we'll talk about that coming right up. Okay, so here we go. That very topic, social SSDI. Again, it also provides a basic income for a person with disabilities. SSDI is based on the person's income, earned income. If they've been eligible for SSI all along, they don't have to apply separately for SSDI. Social Security will catch up to you. The state really looks for that because it saves them money, because once they move to SSDI and Medicare, that's 100% federal. The state doesn't have to put any in, but that's also why you have to pay attention to be careful that you want to stay Medicaid eligible. You may receive both SSI and SSDI. Let's see. And as you continue to work, your payment, your SSDI payment will go up almost yearly if they're working regularly. So, you know, usually person has worked, depending on how much they're making, I would say 5-6 years. If they're making a kind of good money, it might come before then. But they could, you know, within 5 years of working, begin to draw an SSDI payment. Oops. And again, after 2 years of receiving SSDI, they will be eligible for Medicare. Okay, and now we're going to talk just briefly Social Security Childhood Disability Benefits, CDB or DAC, formerly called DAC. So the difference here is it's based on the work record of a retired, deceased, or disabled parent. And it doesn't start until the parent begins to take, if they're retiring, until they actually take SSA benefits. So if they don't actually draw their benefits until they're 70, then the person can't draw until they turn 70. The parent turns 70. It always will draw on the person's record first. So if they were getting a little bit of SSI and they have SSDI based on their own work record, and then they're applying for their parents, what will happen is when they get a check, they're going to draw first on the person's own record. So let's say they're drawing, their payment is $500 a month. Their SSDI payment is $500 a month, okay? And the parents is getting $1,000 a month. What will happen is they'll draw first on the person's, so $500 will come out of the person's SSDI account, and then the other $500 will come out of the parents. It's not something that's added on, so they're not going to get both. They're not going to get 500 and 1,000, so they're not going to get $1,500. It'll still be 1,000. Whatever the highest amount is what they'll draw. And the benefit is usually up to 50% of the parent's benefit. So they'll usually get about half of the parent, and you'll want to apply based on whoever the higher wage earner was of the parent, who's going to draw the highest amount. And it's usually up to half of the parent's benefit. Once the parent passes away, then it will go up to 75% of the parent's record benefit. It's, you know, how much the disabled adult child benefit will be, it really varies from person, because it's based on the parent's work record. So if the parent worked a lot and had a lot of, you know, just like our own benefits are based on how much we worked, that benefit is based on how much, you know, the parent worked. So it's going to vary. You can't, and you can ask Social Security to calculate that before you draw on it. Yeah, and the total benefit is capped between retirement, spousal, and CDB. That, you know, they can't take more than the actual. It's a little more complicated. I would refer you to benefit specialists. If there's, you know, some families have more than one child with a disability, then the formula is a little bit different of how much will be drawn there. Let's see. No, the parent's Social Security benefit does not get reduced. Okay. Yes, okay, I think I answered this. Okay. All right. So the one thing you need to know, so the child disability benefit, you do have to go in and apply. So if you don't go in and apply, you won't get it. So you have to, once the parent, when the parent goes, either is deceased or retires, then you need to go and make an application for CDB. So eligibility for both SSDI and CDB are similar, but they are a little different from SSI. And this is one of the things for these two programs. The disability needs to occur before age 22. So that's a little different, right? You don't have to show that, you know, it could elsewhere. But for CDB particularly, you have to show that the disability happened before the person was age 22. And you also have to, it's like the disability part also reoccurs. You would think that they would know that the person has a disability if they're getting SSDI and SSI, but often they want you to reprove they have a disability when you apply for CDB. So it's really important to save your records. When a person I know had to go back and prove that his 45-year-old daughter actually had Down syndrome, they wanted to actually see the chromosome test. So save those, you know, diagnostic things forever so that you can prove that later. You got to show, so you have to be, it has to be before age 22, the disability. You have to show that they have earned less than SGA, that 1,310. So if they've made more than that at different points in their life, or if they're making more than that now, that could preclude them from getting that larger child disability payment. So that's something you need to pay attention to. Let's see. Say the person with disabilities on SSI and is collecting from a deceased parent's record. What happens when the other parent retires or passes away? So they can apply for CDB, but you would need to see which parent's records you want to draw on, right? You know, if usually the parent's record is much more than the person with a disability, and that's a higher payment. So you're just going to want to look at, you know, who would give you the higher payment if that's what's important to you. Here's the tricky part. There's no asset test for CDB or SSDI. But again, here in red, to retain Medicaid, it's important to keep under $2,000. And again, we often see Social Security not informing families of that part. So you do need to pay attention. And again, after 2 years, it would provide Medicare. So also with SSDI, CDB, if you're just on SSI and CDB, unearned income is not limited. So that whole thing about not getting money, that doesn't get reduced if you're no longer on SSI. And again, assets are not limited, but you have to be really careful around that $2,000. SSI treats Social Security and CDB as unearned income and will be reduced dollar for dollar after the first 20. SSDI is also what I call an all or nothing payment. Either you get the whole payment or you get nothing. So once you pass, go over 1310, if they're earning more than that, and they're no longer SSDI, you either get the whole check, whatever, let's say you're getting $1,000 a month in SSDI, either you get the whole thing, or if you go over, you're not going to get a check. So, people really have to weigh in how much they want that SSDI check or CDB check, especially if they're working, and how important work is involved. Let's see. Yes, they can continue to receive Medicaid. In fact, that's what the next slide is. And it's important to continue to keep those your services. You need to make sure you stay Medicaid. So sometimes you have to find another way. So if your SSDI payment or CDB payment is now over more than your SSI payment, as soon as your SSDI payment is $20 more than the SSI payment, so $794 plus 20 is what, 800 and let's see, I don't add very well, $804 or something. As soon as it goes $20 over the payment, then you are no longer SSI eligible. It knocks you off, and it can be a little rattling because you'll suddenly get a letter in the mail saying, sorry, you're no longer eligible for Medicaid, and you're going to be scrambling, and they're going to want to know how you're going to pay your Medicare premiums, and you've got to figure things out. It's not very user friendly, I must say. So you need to figure out how you're going to stay Medicaid eligible. And the good news is most of our folks are going to fall under a couple of these things. So, first of all, they could be eligible just based on their income, even with the payment. If they're making, just on their income, if they're making up to 138% of federal poverty level, that would just on their income, that would keep them Medicaid eligible. There is a spend down program, but there's some negatives around that are difficult to keeping services. And there's that SSI category that keeps you right. That's where they've all been. But there's also something called the special income limit. So that is 3 times the SSI benefit, which in this year, I believe it's $2,349, I believe. And that might be the 2020, whatever 794 times 3 is, that's called the special income limit. And it's kind of if you're on a waiver, most of our folks are going to be eligible through that. So that will keep you on your waiver, right, to keep your services. If you go over that, then it becomes a little more challenging. But if they're working, they could jump over to healthcare for workers with disabilities. Again, there is there's no resource limit, doesn't matter about the $2,000, and there's no income limit, but it does have a premium. You do have to pay a monthly premium, but it can't be more than 7.5% of your gross income. So it's usually well worth it for folks to do that. And you don't have to be working that much. It can just be a few hours a month even, and that would keep them Medicaid. Once in a while, we'll see folks that have a really high benefit from their parents, but usually most Social Security payments are not going to be close to $2,349 a year. It's usually the combination of working and the income, the benefit that will kick them off. So, but you do need to pay attention to that whatever the 3 times it is. Okay. So again, it's really important to figure out how you're going to, and usually at this point in time, I will tell families, if once your son or daughter is no longer SSI and they're only SSDI or CDB, it's probably, and they're working, probably really good, important to talk to a benefits planner. Washington State recently set up something called Benefit U, BENEFIT, the letter U.org. And you can go and request a benefits planner. They also have a lot of videos about Social Security, and they can answer questions as well. So that's a really great resource for folks. Here, I'll put it in the chat box. Hold on. It looks like this. Benefit. Yeah, www.benefitu.org. Okay. So again, just a caution, it's really important to keep that, that SGA 1,310 in 2021. It'll go up in January again a little bit. To keep that in your mind as your son or daughter increases their earned income. There are ways to bring SGA down, some work incentives and so forth, the cost to support them, they can reduce it by how much job coaching they receive, or how much support they need to work. But again, once they've exceeded that $1,310, that SGA amount for the year, there's no turning back. So it's something that you need to keep in mind as you plan. Some people, it's fine to let that go, and they're, SSDI, and they just want their loved one to work. They're perfectly capable of working, but you do need to plan for when you're not here. And so some families need to consider that, whether that CDB payment, you want that available to them or not. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. It's $1,310 per month. Sorry. I know that's confusing. So some tips for maintaining eligibility. Again, keep your funds separate from your person's funds, separate from yours. You know what? Be organized and keep good records. Here's the deal. Social Security, you know how with the IRS, they say keep your records for like 7 years and then you can dispose of them. Social Security doesn't have that rule. They could request your records going back 20 years. Now, we don't usually hear them do that, but it's possible. So you don't have to save the actual paper record. You could keep electronic records, but it's up to you to prove things. So you're going to want to keep some sort of records. You're going to want to keep that information about their disability for when you're going to apply for CDB. You want to know that information about their disability. So again, document always, again, keep your eye on that $2,000 limit. Okay. That's a lot to absorb, but I am happy. Here's my contact information. I'm always happy to, if you want to email me and you have questions. Here's our Community Homes website. And with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I'm sure you all have lots of questions. So it's always a hot topic. Oh, and let me, hold on, I'll get you make sure you have the link to the handouts. And I'm sorry, I didn't have that link ready. Just a second.
And I can always, if anybody misses, getting the link, they can email me, and I can always send them,
Okay.
anything. So, and I'll put my information here.
I think I have it. Copy link. Okay. See, find the chat box again. Okay, here's a link to the handouts.
And I put my contact information. So
Absolutely.
Kathy, when Paul's father passed away, I remember, because I guess I didn't realize that it was done, or when it was done. I just noticed that Paul was getting more money.
Yes.
So once that happens, so he is, this is something I have a hard time understanding. Is he no longer on SSI?
If his payment exceeds $794, he is no longer on SSI. He is probably strictly on SSDI, Child Disability Benefits.
Yeah, it used to be Disabled Adult Child. Disabled.
They changed it just to keep us confused.
Yeah. And so, that being said, because it's SSDI, if he wants to keep his Medicaid, then he still stays in the $2,000 under limit.
Yes.
Okay.
But he could use an ABLE account or a special needs trust to put money in.
Okay. Okay. So then, say I retire one of these days. At that point, and I've had families ask this, at that point, he doesn't get both. He doesn't get his father's and mine. He gets his father or me.
Right. Whatever, you'll want to figure out which one would be more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody has a question here.
I have a question, Kathy. I'm sorry. It looks like I've been asking it to the wrong person in the chat.
Sorry.
If the higher earning parent dies, does a benefit go up to 75% of their Social Security at that point, or does it revert to the lower earning parent's Social Security?
So it depends on who
parent's still alive.
So it depends on who they were drawing on. So let's say one, you have two parents and one was retired, and so they were drawing on that one.
Yeah.
And then the other one wasn't retired, but then they die. Okay.
I was more interested in the case where the higher earning parent retires, the child is drawing on that parent's Social Security at 50%, and then it goes up. Does it go up to 75% when that parent dies, or if there's the other parent's still alive, does it revert to their Social Security and they get 50% of that?
Whatever one is higher. So you may need to go back and ask, you have to apply based on either parent. So you can go back and switch it out to the other parent.
Okay, but if you don't, then it would go up to 75% when that.
Yeah. So if they're drawing on a parent that retired and then the person dies, it would go up to the 75%.
I see. Thank you.
Someone's got their hand raised.
Yeah. Is it Zane?
Yeah.
Zane, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you said it was important to keep good records,
Yes.
I was told that if we use a debit card, that we don't need that can be counted as records, or but then I heard otherwise, that even if you do use a debit card, we still should keep our receipts. I'm curious what you
Okay.
mean
Well,
by
there's
with
different
records.
kinds of records. So the first thing I was thinking was anything that SSI mails you, you want to keep that. Any letters. So when you get a letter in the mail, if they're working and the letter says, and you've reported income, you'll get a letter back that says, thank you for reporting your income. It was XYZ for this month. Thank you for reporting that. Or any kind of correspondence, you want to save that. I technically yes, they may want you to save receipts, but I think they are, if you're using a debit card, I think they're that's probably good enough. I tend to save all the receipts. The problem is they fade within a few months anyway. So what you probably really want to have is some sort of system that you record, whether it use Quicken or a spreadsheet. You're going to need that anyway for guardianship if you're using guardianship, and just keep track so that you can, look at the bank receipts and say, you can put notes, oh, this was for this or this was for that. It can't hurt to stick those receipts in an envelope and keep them. So, yeah. I know it's kind of a pain. Somebody was asking a question about Medicare and Medicaid. Apart from services provided by Medicaid, when talking strictly about the quality of healthcare received, you can have both Medicare and Medicaid. There are advantages. Medicare, it is easier to find a provider usually to take Medicare. Sometimes it can be hard to find somebody that takes Medicaid, but usually if you have Medicare and Medicaid, they'll take both with a few exceptions. So it's like that you get the opportunity to have a little bit wider network with Medicare than with Medicaid, but Medicaid will usually they'll use Medicaid to pay the second. Medicaid will be the secondary and picks up the difference. And again, Medicaid pays for those other services. Other questions?
Okay.
This isn't a
Oh.
question, but it's an interesting thing because I just went through, my daughter was switched over from Medicaid to Medicare coverage
Yeah.
because she'd gotten SSDI for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't like aware of what all that meant. It was kind of a hassle working through it. But
Yep.
she's on one of these, she's on a Medicare supplement. And the funds, the premium is actually paid by the state because she's
Yep.
also Medicaid eligible.
Yep.
And there's some really great benefits through those. She gets through hers through Molina, but I think there's several others now that have it, and they're just adding. I mean, it's like getting an older person would get a Medicare supplement and get all kinds of other benefits, and she's getting those. So it's worth looking into if you haven't already done that. It's actually really surprising what they're adding. It's called an HMO SNP, which is, I think, a special needs plan. And I really didn't know what I was signing up for, and it turns out it's a really great thing. So
yeah, they're dual complete, I think, plan, the special Medicare, Medicaid dual plans. There are some real advantages. My kids are on those, and they do. It's like they give you a card for $100 a month, I think, for over the counter stuff.
Yep.
Medical stuff. And so there are some things. Has been a few. If you just have to make sure that whatever plan you choose has the network of providers that you want. and that all your specialists are, will be on that plan.
Right.
And any medication, whether it will cover any medications. And you can go, there are brokers who are, they don't just do one, you have to be careful because sometimes they only, folks will only want to sell you one plan. You want to go to one that knows what all the plans are, and they can actually look up for you the network, and they'll look up your medications to make sure that your medications are on there. So every once in a while, with my son, he needed to have some physical therapy. It was a little hard finding someone to take that particular plan, but he's been able to be at all his specialists at UW have been covered under that, and hasn't had any problem, both my son and daughter. And he has some pretty technical specialists, a lot of them, and he has some pretty complicated medicines. So I found that all that it was just the little bit of physical therapist finding was a challenge. Okay, so in the chat box, so do we apply at full retirement for the highest earning parent's Social Security income, at the same time apply for CBD for our child? So CBD and applying for the parent's income, that's kind of the same thing. So you do want to apply to see who would have the highest benefit for your loved one. Yeah, when you retire, when you begin drawing benefits, unless the parent becomes disabled or passes away. And let's see, somebody else has their hand up.
Yes. Question. So the qualification for CDB benefit is for, if I recall, for the parent to start drawing Social Security. So does that mean as early as age 62? Is that true?
As soon as they start drawing a benefit. Yeah. Okay. So that's potentially yes. And you want to decide, when they're going to do that. So yeah.
And second question, if you don't mind. So once we decide on the parent to qualify for CDB at age 62, let's say, is it possible to switch to the other parent later on to increase the monthly benefit?
Yes. Yes, you can go back and reapply, and they'll switch it out. I believe so.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Kathy, someone's asking about if our loved one is on SSI, we do or do not have to apply for SSDI CDB when the parent starts drawing on his or her retirement.
When it's on their own income, if the person with the disability has been working, they don't have to apply. It'll just switch. If they're going to apply for CDB, they do have to apply, because they're going to redo that disability, because the rules are different. It has to be before age 22. So yeah, you do have to reapply.
Yeah. And does it matter if the parents are divorced?
No.
If the child's living with the parent with a lower income?
No.
I mean, Paul's father and I had been apart for a very long time, and I mean, I'm still working, but his dad passed away, but I mean, he still was able to draw. I mean, they just have to be the parent, the biological parent. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Well,
did I miss any others?
I think we got them. I wrote everything down as they came, and unless I missed something, you answered everything. Thank you, Kathy, so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. And thank you. Oh, wait, one second. A question came in. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, it's not a question.
Okay, and you're welcome to send me an email if you go crawl in bed tonight and a question pops in your mind. Feel free to drop me an email.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you,
Kathy.
You are welcome.
Wonderful.
Have a good evening.
You
Thank
too.
you. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, there we go.